Hello everyone, and welcome to your 77th Cocoa programming tutorial. In this tutorial, we're going to be talking about how we can create services from our Cocoa applications. So to demonstrate what a service is, it's much easier to just demonstrate it. So we can select some text here, and if I go down to the services menu, this is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about a service. It is basically a service that an application can vend to the system, and then the system can use these different services in a variety of contexts. So basically, different applications on my Mac have vended off to the operating system essentially these various services, and we can see those different services here. So we can see an example of, I can search this text in DuckDuckGo. We can use bb-edit. So I could, because I have bb-edit installed, there's the option to create a new document from this text selection, right? So what we're trying to do in this tutorial is generate our own services so that we could open up our own Cocoa application from different contexts. Just one more thing to note is that you can go up to the Xcode menu and go to services, and this is true for any application out there. There's generally a services menu under the app itself, and then you can select various services. All right, so with that said, what we're doing is we want to make an application that's going to calculate word count. And so it's pretty simple. We're going to be able to do this based on a URL, or we're going to be able to do this based on a selection of text. So basically I could do it in Finder, where I select a document and we'll parse the number of words in the document, or I can do it like I just showed you, where we manually select some text. So the first step here is we're going to go ahead and make a new class. I'm going to call it service provider, and we'll do that. And then I have this nice little snippet here for me, which already implements what I want to do. And basically, we just have this service provider class. There's this specific function or method format that I have. It's called count words, and there's also another variation which I have is count word string, and we'll see what the difference is between these two. Very important is that you have, if you're using this in Swift, you need to use the @Objective-C context, because these are going to be dynamically called. There's no, basically it's based off of a string that I'm going to put in an info plist in a bit, so make sure you have this @Objective-C thing so we can dynamically call this method. And this is basically the format that you'll want to have in these documents. Now, where am I basing all of this off of? Well, this nice little document here called the Services Implementation Guide. And basically, there's a section down here that says the method providing the service is of the form message name, user data, error. And so I'm just converting that Objective-C logic into Swift logic here. All right. So the logic that I have for count words, pretty simple. I'm given a pasteboard object, and from the pasteboard, I'm going to just read, in this case, I'm going to see if I can get a URL, and then if I can get the document URL that I have selected. So think of, I right click in Finder and I want to read a particular document. Once I get the document URL, I'm going to see if I can get the string contents of the document URL. And then I have this handy little helper function, which goes into NS spell checker and counts the number of words in that document. And then I'm also doing this additional thing where I write out to the pasteboard. So in the context of, I actually want to change something about this. I want this to be the general pasteboard. So in the context of Finder, I basically am going to right click on a document, going to calculate the number of words in that document, and then on the general pasteboard, I'm going to write back out in a string format here the number of words that I have selected. Then the other context here is for the count word string call, and this is going to be when I have manually selected text on some kind of text field or text view, and then I right click on it and I'm going to have this service appear, and we're going to have this word count service appear on that document. So that's what we have there, and that's pretty much it. So going back to the app delegate, the next thing we have to do is make sure we register this service. So to do that, we go down to NSApp, service provider, and then we just pass an instance of our service provider onto our service provider checkpoint there. So that's pretty much it. And once you've done that, you've actually registered your service to start listening for, so basically what will happen is that we're going to register on the OS itself for these services, and then the application will launch on account of those services being activated, and then the service provider will handle whatever service was actually called upon. So depending on whether count words or count word string was called, then that's what's going to be called in response. Now, the last thing that we have to do is make sure that we actually register these services in the info plist. So the reason that we have to do this is because we don't want to have to launch the application to have all these things be registered all the time. We just want to have some publicly interfacing way that the OS can basically just check out all the applications we have and then see what services are available. So to do this, we're going to go down to our info plist, open as source code. And I've already entered these services in just because it's kind of a pain for me to copy and paste them. But basically all of this text here is what you're going to want to add. And if you want to find this example, again, all of my code is always on GitHub, or you can check out that document that I'll leave in the description and you can look at how they implement theirs. But essentially the idea is that we have a key for NS services, and then that key will vend an array of dictionaries that will give you these formats for services. Now the general format that you need is the message that you need, so NS message, and this is going to be that message or the first word in your method that's going to be called. So the service provider, here we have count words, here we have count words string. This is this is where we use the NS message value, and this is what the system is registering so that it knows which method to call into given the different contexts. So here we have count words. In this other service here, right, we have two different services. We have one for count words string. Then the other section is the menu item that you're registering on when you right click and you go into the menu, right? The menu item needs to have some kind of text, and to vend that you just need this key for NS menu item. Default is the key that you use for registering the string, and then you just need a string value, and this is the text that's going to appear when you show the menu item. Then you need some kind of required context, and there's various required contexts that you can specify, but if you don't have any specific ones, you can just leave an empty dictionary for that. Then on our then we need the types that basically we're going to be able to accept into our service. So we can have send types here, and NS send types defines which types of values we can accept into the service. So here I'm saying that I can take any file name, basically any file on the system, and that's the send type that I expect to come into our count words service that we have. Then there's the other one, which is our count words string service, and it's basically all the same except it has different values for send types, and it also has an NS return type. So the NS send type for the case where we select some text and I want to parse out that text is an NS string pboard type. And a very important thing to note is that this is actually an old enum definition, and if you use the new enum definition, it will actually not work. So if you look up this value in the pasteboard, you'll see that it's deprecated with a replacement. Unfortunately, that replacement is not understood by the old services implementation, so make sure you use the old value if you're actually going to try and register these things. Then the last value is the return type, and this defines the values that you're going to put back into the pasteboard if you're going to put back anything at all. Notice that there is no return type for the case where I'm registering this on a URL type, but or a file type rather, but there is a defined one that I have for the text selection, and what I'm going to do in the text selection case is I'm actually going to write back into the pasteboard the return value. And I mean, this is totally optional, but it will demonstrate how you can write back into the pasteboard a different value. So the important thing to note on that is that the pasteboard that's actually passed in, if you want to write out your changes, so if you want the return type to write back this value, basically what I'm defining is that on this pasteboard object, which I'm passing into here, I'm going to set the string value. And so basically you just want the return type value to match whatever you're expecting to be written back onto the pasteboard. So in the case of our count word string service, I had the return type of NSString pboard type. All right, so that is everything that you need to do to actually have an application that registers two different services in my case, and we can go ahead and give it a go. So I'm going to go ahead and just rebuild this application, and I'll just launch it for good sake so we can see it's all good. Now, what we want to do is head over to Terminal, and there's a different tool that you're going to want to use to register these services. So basically, we need to kick off the system to let it know, hey, there's a different info plist that you should go and check out now, because the system isn't constantly monitoring for these kind of things. So what we want to do is we want to go into this tool called PBS, and it's found under System Library Core Services PBS. And basically this tool helps you with services. So there's a command for update. If you want to see general commands, you can just do -h, and there's various commands you can use there. But what I want to do is update the existing services. So that'll basically rescan the system for services to see what's available. And then what we want to do then is there's another option for dumping to the pasteboard. And I actually realized that this isn't on here. Maybe it's the same as dump. Let me go ahead and try that. So I guess it's the same as dump, but the documentation lists dump pboard. Anyway, if I look into this, it's going to dump out all the registered services that macOS understands. And from here, I could look for my app bundle name. So my app bundle name is L77. So if I can see that, I can see here L77 app. And oops, I didn't mean to do that. So we can see that there's two different services registered here, right? So there's this first service, and it has word count, and it expects the file name pboard type. And then below that we have the other one, and it's registering the string return type and the string send type. And an important thing that you can get from this is understanding which service it believes is registered. So it gives you the bundle identifier for this, but more importantly, it also gives you where it's picking this service up from. So if you have multiple instances of an application, it's sort of going to have a predefined order on how it's going to pick up these services, and you want to make sure that your service is the one that it's actually picking up. So for example, if you had two instances of the app, right, and if you're making changes, you want to make sure that the changes that you're seeing are actually reflecting your app that's being registered, not something else in the system. So that's important to know, is that you can check where the actual application is being used to that's registered with these services. All right, so with that all said, the last thing that I want to do is show you how you can debug these fun little things. So to launch this with a given application and check out some stats that it'll tell you, how you can do this is you can actually go using, you can basically find the application you want to launch it with. So you can say, I want to launch this with Finder, and then in the finder.app, you go into the actual executable path. So basically you want the full path of the executable that you're trying to launch with. And then there's this -ns debug services, and then you just pass the identifier or bundle identifier that you're trying to basically debug. So if I'm specifically trying to debug my application services, then this is how I can do that. So I'm going to go ahead and hit that, and I'm just going to find an existing Finder window. And now I can test this out. So as I go, if I right click on this menu, right click on this item, we can see that it's going to change some things in terminal there, and it'll give me some feedback. So you can see here, this is kind of the important part. It shows me that this particular service is disqualified because its send or return types cannot be handled by the requester. So that is the service that's dealing with text, but it does tell me that there is another service and it has been approved because we satisfied the required context. So if I go into services, I should now be able to see that there's only one word count instance, and I can click on that and it will vend me the option or the word count output of 9. And we can also see that if I paste into some kind of context, we also wrote out the response to the general pasteboard for whatever computation we did. So we don't even really need the application if we just wanted to get the copy and paste context in this case. All right, so now that we've done that, let's do one more example where we do this with text edit. Just gotta find my already auto-completed thing here. So here's my path to text edit's executable file. And then we want to debug this using our identifier there and hit return on that. And now I should be able to go into text edit and let's open up some recent file here. So let's just go to this. Actually, I already changed this file. Let's see if I can revert it. Let's revert back to last open. So here's a file that has a bunch of different text on it. And if I select this text here, I right click, go down to services and hit word count, we can see that it's actually going to write out the value. And let me just delete this other text here. So we can see that it writes out the value because I wrote back to the pasteboard and my return type was the string that I defined in the info plist. So just to reiterate on that, we had that return type and we defined it to be the return type of the string pboard type. And then on my word count, I'm writing back into the pasteboard that was passed in, I'm writing back out the output word count, and that's what I get. And if let me just undo all this, let me just copy all the text and just show you that we could do the same thing for the entire document. So anyway, that's an example of how you can register services on your Cocoa applications. Generally speaking, if you're trying to do this with a Cocoa application specifically, you want a context in which it's useful to open up your application. Obviously, it's not too useful to open up our word count application if maybe I just wanted to copy it to the pasteboard. So we could register a separate service for that that's outside of the Cocoa application, but thinking of like a BB Edit or a Safari case, that's maybe a case that you would want to register a service so that you could take input from somewhere else and then open up your application. So just to reiterate all the steps that we have, we need to create some kind of service class. Then we have this particular message format where we have the message name, user data, and error. And then we do whatever computation we want inside of here, and we can update our UI, we can update the pasteboard, whatever we want to do here. The second step is make sure that we actually have that service registered, and we just do that in application did finish launching. And then the third thing is make sure that you have defined your services correctly. And you'll find that if you're trying to create these on your own, you might find cases where it doesn't work. And if it doesn't work, these are cases where you'll want to open up terminal and get that nice debug mode, because it tells you things that are qualified, or if they aren't approved or whatever, this nice debug pane will tell you about those cases that it doesn't work. Now, the very last thing I want to demonstrate is that you can debug this using Xcode itself, and you can walk through the code if you're really stuck on why something's not working. So to do this, you can put a breakpoint somewhere, and we can go up to, what do I want to go up to? I want to go to search for attached to process. So if I go down to my debug menu, attached to process, and if I look for process 77 and attach for that, it's going to wait until, actually the app was already running. Let's do that again. So with the app quit, I can go ahead and do this. And now it's going to wait for this process to launch. This is a good case where I can go back to my text edit example here. And if I actually needs to be in the Finder context. So let's go back to Finder. And let's find a little Finder window. And if I right click on this, hit on services, word count, you'll see that Xcode will actually stop at that point, and you'll now be able to debug whatever problems you might hit. So this is also very useful if you're trying to figure out why your service isn't quite working correctly. Just attach from the debugger, so you can attach the process with the application quit, and then when it launches, Xcode will attach to that process, and you'll be able to debug your code. So anyway, I hope that gives you a good understanding of services that you can provide in your Cocoa applications. If you have any other questions, please reference the Services Implementation Guide. There's a bunch of other important information under this Services Property link, where you can check out different things you can define to sort of improve your service or make it more refined to the context that your service might be useful in. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial, and I'll see you guys next week. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to the channel, give this video a like, and share it with your friends. Ways to contribute and additional information are in the description. I'll see you next week.